Good day everyone, we are Group 3. And today we will be presenting about modern art movements from the 1750s to the 1960s. This period is very important in art history because it marks the biggest changes in how art was created and understood. It shows the transition from traditional rule-based art to more modern and expressive styles. Before this period, most artworks followed strict standards. Artists were expected to create paintings that are realistic, balanced, and idealized. Art was often used for religion, historical documentation, or showing important figures. Because of this, artists had limited freedom in expressing their own ideas or emotions. However, during the 18th and 19th centuries, major changes in society began to influence art. One of the most important events during this time was the Industrial Revolution. This period introduced machines, factories, and rapid urban development, which completely changed people's daily life. At the same time, political events such as revolution in Europe also played a big role. This revolution encourages people to question authority, tradition, and long-standing social system. As society changed, artists also began to change their way of thinking. Instead of only following strict rules in art, artists started to explore new ideas. They became more interested in expressing emotions, personal experiences, and how they saw the world around them. Because of these changes, art slowly moved away from tradition and began evolving into what we are now call modern art. In this presentation, we will discuss four major movements that show this transformation.
Good day, I am going to discuss my assigned topic, New Classicism. So, New Classicism is an art movement that began in the mid 18th century. It focused on returning to the simplicity and order of ancient Greek and Roman art. However, it also marked a shift where artists started developing their own interpretations, moving from strict tradition toward individual style. So let's discuss the key characteristics of Neoclassicism. So, it has simple and balanced composition, cleanliness and smooth surfaces, classical themes, history or mythology, and focus on order and discipline. So, neoclassical art is known for its clarity and structure. Artists used balanced designs and idealized figures inspired by ancient sculptures. Even though it followed strict rules, artists began expressing their own ideas within these limits, showing the early shift toward individuality. So we have these sample artworks. Oath of the Horatii. It shows loyalty and sacrifice using strong lines and balanced composition. Second, Death of Marat. It presents a political figure in a simple yet emotional way, blending classical style with modern events. Third, Psyche, revived by Cupid's Kiss. It demonstrates ideal beauty and graceful movement inspired by mythology. These artworks highlights how artists maintain classical structure while expressing personal interpretation and emotion. So, the neoclassicism it still influences modern buildings and design. Its ideas of order and balance remain important today. It also helped shape modern art by encouraging artists to respect tradition while expressing individuality. So, in conclusion, neoclassicism connects the past and present. It revived classical ideas but also allowed artists to explore their own style, making it an important step toward modern art.
Now, we move on to the next art movement, which is Romanticism. Romanticism developed in the late 18th century and became more popular in the early 19th century. It emerged as a reaction against Neoclassicism. While Neoclassicism focused on logic, order, and discipline, Romanticism focused on emotion, imagination, and personal freedom. Artists during this time believed that art should not be limited by strict rules. Instead, it should express what a person truly feels inside. Because of this, Romanticism artworks often show strong emotions such as passion, fear, sadness, and excitement. Now, let us look at an example. One of the most important Romantic artists is Francisco Goya, a Spanish painter known for his emotional and sometimes dark artworks. One of his most famous work is the 3rd of May 1808. In this painting, we can see a dramatic and emotional scene where civilians are being executed by soldiers. The soldiers appear cold and faceless, while the civilians show fear, pain, and helplessness. The central figure raises his arms in surrender, showing intense emotion and vulnerability. This painting is very powerful because it does not idealize the scene. It shows real human suffering and emotion. Unlike Neoclassicism, which focused on control and order, Romanticism focused on emotion and reality. It shows the human experience in a very raw and honest way. Overall, Romanticism is about emotion, imagination, freedom, and human experience. It breaks away from strict rules and allows artists to fully express what they feel. This movement plays an important role in the development of modern art because it introduced the idea that emotion is just as important as reason. Next, we will move on to Impressionism.
Now, let's move on to the next art movement, which is Impressionism. Impressionism began at the late 19th century, around the 1870s, mainly in France. This movement was very different from the earlier styles we discussed, because instead of focusing on historical events, emotions, or strict rules, Impressionist artists focused on capturing a moment in time. The main idea of Impressionism is to show how a scene looks at a specific instant, especially how light and color change everything we see. Artists were not trying to make perfect or highly detailed paintings. Instead, they were trying to capture the feeling or impression of a moment. Now, let's look at an example of Impressionist artist. One of the most famous Impressionist artists is Claude Monet. One of his most well-known works is Impression Sunrise. If we observe this painting, we can see a sunrise over a harbor. At first glance, it may look simple or even unfinished. But that is actually the purpose of Impressionism. Monet used loose brush strokes and soft colors to capture the light reflecting on the water and the mist in the air. The goal is not detail but atmosphere. We can understand that Impressionism is not about precision but about perception. It shows how humans do not see the world in perfect detail all the time. We see it in moments, in light, and in feeling.
And now we will proceed to the number 5, which is Post-Impressionism. So Post-Impressionism was developed by late 19th century as a reaction to Impressionism. Post-Impressionism focused on capturing light and monetary scenes. Post-Impressionism artists wanted to go deeper. They were not satisfied with just showing can I see. Instead, they wanted to express emotion, structure, and personal meaning to their artworks. One major characteristics of Post-Impressionism is the use of bold colors, strong brush strokes. Artists did not try to copy reality. Instead, they changed colors and shapes to express their feelings or ideas. Another important feature is that each artist had a very personal style. Unlike Impressionism, where many artists shared similar techniques, Post-Impressionism allowed artists to develop their own unique way of painting. So, in Post-Impressionism, there is an example which is one of the most famous artists, which paint by Vincent van Gogh, which is the Starry Night. So in this painting, we can see a night sky filled with swirling stars and strong movement. The sky does not look realistic, but it feels very emotional and alive. Van Gogh used thick brushstrokes and strong colors to express his inner feelings rather than the reality. The painting gives a sense of energy, emotion, and imagination.
Now, we move on to the last part of our presentation, which is the influence of these art movements and our conclusion. After studying Neoclassicism, Romanticism, Impressionism, and Post-Impressionism, we can clearly see how art evolved over time. Each movement contributed something new, and together, they shaped what we call now modern art. These movements show a gradual shift from strict rules and tradition toward freedom, creativity, and personal expression. From Neoclassicism's focus on order and discipline, to Romanticism's emotions, to Impressionism's light and everyday moments, and finally to Post-Impressionism's deep personal expression, art became more individual and meaningful over time. One of the most important impacts of these movements is how they influence modern and contemporary art today. In today's world, artists are no longer limited to traditional painting styles. We now see a wide variety of art forms such as abstract painting, digital art, photography, graphic design, and even video editing. All of these are influenced by the freedom introduced by these earlier movements. For example, the idea of expressing emotion through color and movement, which started in Post-Impressionism, is still used in modern digital art and film editing today. Even the way colors are used in movies to set mood and atmosphere is connected to these art movements. You can also see Impressionism's influence in photography, social media, and content, where people try to capture natural, real-life moments instead of perfect staged images. Romanticism also continues to influence storytelling in films and literature, where emotion, drama, and human experience are emphasized. Overall, these art movements did not just stay in history. They continue to live on in the creative works we see and experience today. In conclusion, modern art movements from the 750s to the 1960s marked a major transformation in the history of art. It changed art from being strict and traditionally to being expressive and personal. This shift allowed artists to explore without limits and continues to inspire artists today. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and that's all.